you dumb, beautiful fucker.
Who wants to be in America's slash fic with Abraham Lincoln?
Louisiana Purchase, that's a name.
You need to really get off my balls, okay? I'm gonna kick your ass.
Also, why was Michelangelo so stinky? Ew.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 237 of the AllYouCanHear podcast. I'll be your host today, Patrick, and joining me today are my two card-collecting co-hosts.
Pockets full of trap cards and spell cards and no monsters, Colt.
It's Yugi Moto, also known as Cody here.
So, yeah, Cody's back from the Shadow Realm, a.k.a. Tampa, Florida, and he'll be joining us today for a little banter session about Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I've been obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh! For a while now. I guess you could say a solid 20 years at this point. So, I'm ready.
So, what prompted this is that recently, I would say last 3 to 4 months, the lads have all kind of, in one form or another, got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! And I feel like this would be good a time as any to discuss the subject and just sort of talk about like our memories with the franchise, new and old, cards, series we like, the decks and duels, and just sort of like, it's just going to be a banner session, but under the purview of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series.
Yeah, we aren't expert. This is not an expert Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. I no one here plays competitively, nor has ever played competitively, nor ever wants to. I could not tell you anything about the meta, and I don't think anybody else in this chat could either.
When I play, I ask, can I do that? Is that possible? Is that good? I ask constantly. I don't know what I'm doing.
As far as I'm concerned, someone can look over my shoulder and tell me what to do and also be playing me at the same time. As far as I know.
There are no rules, except for all the rules that happen all the time in Yu-Gi-Oh! And especially the ones that contradict each other.
Oh, yeah. I really do think, and this is one of those things with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it's one of those games where I don't really think it knows what it wants to be. It's one of those rare successes made up of a bunch of like, yeah, we meant to do that. That just, I don't know. Everything from the manga to the anime to the card game itself, in the evolution of the card game itself, it's one of those few pieces of media out there that really sort of, I guess, and then itself into success. Because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the original Japanese manga, and as far as I think this is correct, I haven't Googled it, but from my memory over the past like 6 months, Patrick is just typing up a storm.
Hey, I gotta get into the details here.
Yeah, you're going to TCG Player right now to check on Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards.
Hey, what are you doing spying on my screen?
Yeah, so Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't start out as a manga about a card game. It started out as a manga about games. You know, Yugi is the king of games, and it just so happens that one of the games that Yugi played was Duel Monsters, and in doing so, it was kind of like, oh yeah, we meant to make this whole series about card games, which I really don't think that's what the purpose of the original like series was supposed to be. I think the purpose was to just a guy possessed by a pharaoh playing games. They kind of fell into a card game scenario that made a lot of money. And then, of course, you know, that spawned an anime where the first season is made up of complete horseshit rules that have nothing to do with the original card game. That fell into, and a lot of those cards at the time were even like a lot of cards from early Yu-Gi-Oh! Are considered to be not OP by today's standards, but some of them are broken.
Oh yeah, 100%. Man-eater bug.
Man-Eater Bug, Pot of Greed, hell, even, Black Hole, even down to, like, Monster Reborn. These very simplistic cards with no downsides that are the basis of so many different card games really break the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That relies on an interweaving of complex wording. Anyways, but yeah, so it really, and then going on into the actual card game itself, it kind of starts to, I call it Dragon Ball Zing itself, or DBZing itself, where it's just something has to be more powerful, something has to be more complicated, and then now they've added so many new abilities and so many new card types and things and so many new ways to play that it really is a game that is a shadow of its former self, and I think in some good ways and some bad ways and some not really anywhere ways. But yeah, so Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm excited to dive into it because these past few months I've been obsessed and have spent in this hyperfixation I have come out of with only spending $140 on Yu-Gi-Oh! So I think I'm winning in that regard.
In terms of like collectible series and like hobbies to get into, only $140 is doing pretty good. I will say I haven't spent a dime. I've only been watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetype videos and sort of explaining the history and the lore of certain like series of cards. Because in case you don't know, while there are like hundreds of thousands of cards, there are certain ones that fall under a certain umbrella of design, of like implied story. Like the Elemental Heroes, one of the most famous sets from Yu-Gi-Oh! They have like several within that branch and sub branches of that. And like, to me, like it was all like I think I haven't played the game itself aside from like one banter weekend with the boys recently. Since like the first edition, when the rules, like Cody said, were just kind of whatever. It's like, yeah, it's like this kind of makes sense. We'll just kind of fuck with this until we decide to make up something else, and then kind of counterbalance all the bullshit we made up earlier in a later series. That's kind of been my thing. It's just sort of exploring the periphery of the series. Though I would like to actually play it. There was a game that the lads were talking about getting that kind of takes you through the whole series up to, I guess, a pretty recent point, and introduces at a fair rate all the different new like meta and like versions, like how you go from like basic first edition Yu-Gi-Oh! To like fusions and rituals and like synchro and like pendulum, and just like how it just goes into left field from there. Because I think remember looking at like pendulum shit, I'm like, what the hell does this even mean? Like half the card is like rules and shit.
I tried to play a one single game of pendulum. It was on the latest game that came out. That stuff is so confusing. I bet it's easy once you fully grasp it, but that's everything. It was just so. I just let the game play it for me. I had no fucking clue what I was doing.
Yeah, I don't want to, of course, go into. That's a little funny. I'm looking at the most expensive Yu-Gi-Oh! Items on TCG Player right now, and it says there is one listing of a box. It's called Rise of the Duelist Booster Box, First Edition. And I'm not 100% sure what it is. It's kind of just got a cardboard box with Konami tape on it. And it says the market price is $3,000, which is a shit ton of money. But then it says it only has one listing that goes as low as $8,000. So I'm not 100% sure how that math adds up. Anyways, yeah, I don't want to go into the full rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because we'd be here for 3 days. But pendulums are, I think, some of the best. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff that Yu-Gi-Oh! Added, like, throughout the years, They added, they really expanded, like, the first series with Yu-Gi-Moto, they expanded on rituals, and they did some fusion stuff. Everyone knows, I think, Flame Swordsman and Thousand Year Dragon and shit like that with the fusions, and which is cool. But then they expand, like the second one, GX, the second series, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. They really expanded on fusions, 5Ds, did synchros, Existe did Existe monsters, and after that was Arc 5, which did pendulums, which is what you guys were talking about. And then the newest one, they did Link, and I think they're about to do something called Rush Dueling, which is basically a whole new rule set for Yu-Gi-Oh! With new cards, which is a little bizarre to me that they're doing that, but okay. But yeah, no, I think out of all of those, even though like a lot of the cards, I think the synchros, which are the white cards, and the Existe, they're kind of cool in their own right, and they have little cool effects. I think the most game-breaking one, at least in my opinion, that I've seen while playing was the pendulums, because basically each pendulum card is both a magic card and a monster card. Whether that's an effect monster, synchro monster, Existe monster, it's just a magic card plus some type of monster. So it has basically two effects. If you play it as a magic card, it acts as a magic card, but it also acts as a pendulum card, because pendulum cards also have pendulum scores, where it has a number. If you place down 2 pendulum cards with, like, let's say you place down one pendulum card with a 1 and then another one with an 8, you can summon on any turn any amount of cards in your hand, like any amount of monster cards in your hand, to the field between the levels of 1 and 8. Obviously,
which is absolutely messed up.
It is so fucked up, because that means that you could, if you had a deck that focused on fusion, you could do that. So it was it's kind of like this insane thing where synchros were basically, I don't know, they're like a new version of fusion cards. Cool. Existe were also a new version of fusion cards. Cool. Just non-specific fusion cards. Cool. Then the pendulums come in and they're like, actually, you're about to just flood the field with monsters and do whatever you want. And it got so bad, Pendulum was so broken, that they introduced something called Link monsters, which is the newest, the blue cards with the arrows, that basically said you couldn't play a synchro monster, or I'm sorry, you couldn't play a pendulum monster or synchro monsters or Existe monsters except for cards that arrow pointed at. I don't really know the rule set for that, but they took that rule out just like back in April this year. They a few years ago they came out with a bunch of rules, and then this year they said actually those rules are broken. And so we're going to fix it by not really fixing it, by basically breaking anyways, I'm rambling right now just to say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not know what it wants to be. It has no clue what it wants to be. And I think that might be a good thing in some regards, but also it leads to some crazy, shit.
I like that about Yu-Gi-Oh! I haven't really been into Yu-Gi-Oh! that much throughout the years, but one of my favorite things about it is because it just changes. It's so different. Like, I played a lot, mostly, when Synchro and then Existe just came out, and whenever I try to jump back in, I try to ask Wenzel or Cody about it, and they still didn't know what the fuck was happening either. Because it just changes so much.
I do love this aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's just the blind leading the blind in every possible sense.
I mean, it took me, I would say, so what got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Was I just was into Yu-Gi-Oh! For a while. Like, I just wanted to get back into it. I think the monsters are cool looking. They're nostalgic in some aspects. And also, I love the random, mechanics of the new cards. And I really wanted to get back into it without spending money, so I was like, okay, for $40, I'm going to buy I think it's Duel Links, maybe? I don't really know the name of it. It's got the longest name on the fucking planet.
It's the last Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game that was released on pretty much every console.
Legacy of the Duelist. I'm sorry. It's called Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution, which actually came out in 2019.
But it had a DLC that came out 2020, I think.
Yes, which was last year, which updated the rule sets and things of that nature. Yes. Anyway, so I bought that game for $40, thinking, hey, I'm gonna play this. And this is gonna be like this is gonna prevent me from spending $300 on cards. And I was like, okay. And I started playing it, and it really did. It did stop me from spending $300 on cards. I did end up spending $100, but I was able to play all through the original Yu-Gi-Oh setting. And this is the game that, Patrick, you were talking about earlier. And then I actually taught you how to play the new card mechanics. And that was fantastic. I got to learn a lot. I got to play some but it's genuinely very difficult to play. Like there are times where I'm like, this is not a children's card game. This is not anywhere near a children's card game. Like, this is actually difficult, and some of it's not even fun difficult. Some of it's just
it's just hard.
It's just pre-imposed bullshit that you have to remember. There's so much you have to remember and know in order for you to play. Comparing it to other card games like Pokemon. Okay, for example, Pokemon's a trading card game. Even though it's, mostly a video game first. Video game first, anime second, trading card third, game third. I would say that's kind of Pokemon's lineup. Pokemon is more solid. They have introduced new gimmicks and things like that, but the gimmicks are non-game breaking and they're kind of seasonal in a way. Like, some of the gimmicks that they introduce are seasonal.
They're kind of the same, really.
Yeah, there's really not that much of a difference, and the differences are typically built into the previous rules. Like, for example, like the Arc V cards and things of that nature. Not Arc V. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! Jesus fucking Christ. What is it called?
VMAX?
VMAX and all that. Like, yes, they have I think, special rules, but most of the change in the card comes from the fact that their HP is bumped up to hell and back, and they have OP attacks and things of that nature. Like, there's no special summoning of those cards. It's just like the mechanics of the gimmick are built into the game. It's just like, okay, I don't really know. It's a repackaged rule set. I don't know. It makes like a few years ago they released where they released 2 Pokemon per card, right?
Yeah.
The tag team cards.
The tag team cards. Nothing really changed rule-wise. It's just more powerful monsters and more powerful cards. They did introduce a new ability, which wasn't really that new because it kind of followed in the same path as old abilities. So, like, Pokemon has really stuck to its roots in that regard, because you could probably, it probably wouldn't go as well, but you could probably play first-gen Pokemon cards versus new-gen Pokemon cards. It probably wouldn't go as well, but there are some cards that you can pull from those older sets and play them with the newer sets and be okay. Magic the Gathering, I'm sure there's some power creep as well in there, but Magic the Gathering has pretty much a full standard set of rules that are completely compatible with each other. Yu-Gi-Oh! Every single time it releases a new card, a new show or a new card, it absolutely just changes the goddamn rules. Like, they just completely change the rule set. And to me, that's like the most confusing thing, is because it doesn't, like, that's the reason why, like, I would never be able to go into the meta. I would never be able to go into a duel with people, because it changes so quickly. And it changes so dramatically that by the time you spend $500 on cards, well, they may be useless.
Because the meta changes so quickly, and like there's just so much, I feel like, card science that goes into it. I feel like to be adequately invested, it feels like Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to be your primary hobby, because that you just need to devote that brain space to all the different rules and just remembering everything. And it kind of feels like you really have to set aside what sort of era of play you want to focus on, because other than that, it kind of feels like, like old, like first gen Yu-Gi-Oh cards are useless, like in a certain respect, because like especially when they're playing against like the cards that came out this year, because there's just a gulf of difference in terms of their power and their play style. And, like, every card about now has some effect. So, like, when we were playing our duel at Banter Weekend, Like I remember I kept feeling like I had to like look at every single card before like multiple times that I had face down because like what the like I couldn't possibly remember everything a single card all my cards do, and so like just like you just have like I feel like you have to play on like 4D chess just to remember everything about the cards you have at your disposal. Never mind like jumping into what the other person does. Now I'm sure some other Yu-Gi-Oh player will be like, "Wow, look at these nerds. They can't figure out Yu-Gi-Oh." Well, sorry that we're not evolved enough to acquiesce to this card game. But I do think, as hard as it is, I still find it very fun.
The most fun you can have with Yu-Gi-Oh is making your own rules and slamming different generations of cards together. Even though rule-wise you can't really do that, but I don't care. I want them to fight.
Yeah, like there's no Yu-Gi-Oh cops. Like they're not gonna get down the door for you not following like the capital T, capital R, the rules.
So, just to give you an idea of how game-breaking some of those early cards were, I'm just looking at some spell cards that came out, and I'm just going to go off my brain. But these were all from the first 2 to 3 years of Yu-Gi-Oh card sets released. Now, remember that's like quite a bit. Pot of Greed, Forbidden. Still
Isn't
to
that
this
just
day.
draw 2 cards?
They just draw 2 cards with no like side effects. Which may not. It's like, what's the big deal about that? Well, when your hand is at least 5 cards, like to get 2 cards, like out of like principally a 30 to 40 card deck, like that sort of increases your viability like substantially, even if that doesn't sound like a lot. So like every other version of Pot of Greed has some sort of secondary effect to sort of curtail, just the act of like gaining 2 extra cards for free.
Yeah, I mean that's 2 card advantage is what they call that, I believe. I don't really, and I'm trying to learn the lingo, so if I get it wrong, I don't want anybody coming after me. But cards like that, the Pot of Greed, Heavy Storm, which actually came in the original Legend of Blue Eyes, which was technically my first rare card I ever got, was from a pack from a CVS, and it was a Legend of Blue Eyes pack, and back in 2000 and I want to say 2, 3, whatever, and it was a card called Heavy Storm, which destroys all spell and trap cards in the field. Which is awesome. There's Cold Wave, which is one was not rare at all. And it was just kind of in everything, was completely forbidden. Change of Heart, forbidden. That was one of, what's his name's? Bakura's, like, big ones. I mean, there's just quite a few of them from that earlier stage where they were trying to build this fun little card game that later on, whenever it became so complex, it was just like, okay, well, these cards are so pure, so powerful, we can't use them anymore because they're game breaking, which makes no sense, but at the same time makes a lot of sense. I don't know. Graceful Charity. I mean, that one you draw 3 cards and discard 2. I mean, I don't know. It's insane to me how some of these cards have been in the game since the very, very beginning, and yet they're not used at all because of how broken they are in the modern day. Which sounds like we've been hating on Yu-Gi-Oh for a long time here. Which, it has its downfalls, but the truth is that I have a ton of fun playing Yu-Gi-Oh because of its complexity, right?
Hours can go by playing Yu-Gi-Oh. It's the most... It just passes so easily. The time does. I don't know what it is about Yu-Gi-Oh. It just sucks you in. Like, you'll think, okay, we'll play 1 or 2 duels. It's been 4 hours, and you've dueled probably twice.
Because I remember distinctly when we had Banter Weekend, during Yu-Gi-Oh! Hyperfixation mode, the boys played, 2 duels, and that was, almost an hour and a half.
One duel, it was like a duel. It was me and Cody on one team, Tanner and Wenzel on the other. And it took, I want to say 3 hours. It took so fucking long. It was the most painful thing, but it was still really fun.
It is quite the game to play with 4 people. Even though it's there's no official rules for it. We just kind of made up as we went to just kind of play together. And it just took forever because, I mean, even if we were to know our cards exactly, it still would have taken about 2 hours. There was a lot of times where we didn't know the cards because we were playing with random decks that we had, and it was just hard because everyone had different decks with different abilities and different things, and we all had to look and read. And I have so much in my brain from Yu-Gi-Oh that I honestly, I don't know. I feel like I've wasted so much space on Yu-Gi-Oh in my head because I know so much about the rules, and even I know a lot about the rules, but there are people out there who make these decks who will first, it was almost like there was a time, especially during the pendulums, from what I understood, where there were people who made decks specifically to win in one turn. And you could do that by summoning, like your opponent goes first, they set up their space, and then now it's your turn, so you can actually attack them. So you pendulum summon 5 cards, special summon 2, synchro another, and the next thing you know, you just 8,000 pointed your opponent, and they're gone. And you could do that in one turn in some ways. And it's those people who can just slap them down and be like, your turn. I don't see how they exist in this planet. But anyways.
All that talk about the rules, it kind of makes your head spin. So why don't we move on to something a little bit simpler and just sort of the appreciation for the characters themselves. So one point I want to talk about sort of like favorite monsters, favorite archetypes, and sort of like just like a simple appreciation for like just the artwork or the story. So I wanted to hear from y'all. What were some of your favorite like cards? Just from either from the stories, from the characters, from the effects. I wanted to find out that from y'all. What are some of your favorites? Colt, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Recently, I just found out about this card due to a Yu-Gi-Oh account. I think it's called a Twitter account that's called Every Yu-Gi-Oh Card in Existence. And for Halloween, they posted a bunch of cool ones, like Halloween versions of already existing cards. But they posted one of a dog. It's called the dog Marin. It's the outstanding dog Marin, and it has a line of cards that's related to it. A little bleak, but they're still very fun. Some alternates that are not in the line are like Mad Dog of Darkness is like a demon dog version of Dog Marin, which is a cute, fluffy dog, by the way. And there's Mecha Dog Marin, but there is a line where the outstanding Dog Marin dies, and it becomes the Skull Dog Marin. And it's not as sad as it sounds, because it's got its own line of little cards where you can see the little Skull Dog has his little skull family. It's a very cute and very fun little thing of cards, and I really like them. Whenever the dog in the line of cards goes missing, it's called Where Art Thou? And there's White Prince, which is a little prince boy with the little Marin, Skull Dog Marin. And then there is the female version of Marin called Outstanding Dog Mary. It's all cute little dogs. It looks just so good. But for my cards before this that I really liked are the Junk Warrior cards. I really like those. Mostly because whenever I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, around 11, 12, 13, I can't remember. It was the first deck I had. It was the Junk Warrior Synchros. It was just really fun archetype
from 5Ds, yeah. The junk ones were great. I think they were a lot of fun because I really, starting with GX is when it really started to really take hold, was where Yu-Gi-Oh! Moved away from like just random ass monsters to like almost like storylines in a way, because like the storylines, you don't know the storylines behind the elemental heroes, right? Like, but there is a story there. Like there is a story. Maybe it was built into the anime, maybe it was built into the manga a little bit, but for the most part, the cards themselves were not the story in the anime. The cards themselves had a separate story that the designers and the writers sort of had in their minds, and they kind of did in the background, right? Which I thought was super cool, was how you can have these, like, for example, one of the big examples, at least from the original Yu-Gi-Oh, was the Dark Magician line, where you had, of course, Dark Magician being Yugi Moto's favorite. I used to love Dark Magician. I thought it was super cool. I think the Dark Magicians were very cool designs. Then they have Dark Magician Girl. Well, now with reboots and what do they call them, retools and things of that nature, now there's a whole like Dark Magician Girl line where you have like Dark Magician Girls based on flavors. Flavors? I'm sorry, I'm Googling it to make sure.
Yeah, like I noticed it was like around the time that I stopped caring about Yu-Gi-Oh. They randomly just started throwing in random anime girl cards where it just looks like anime girls all over. They look cool, but it was just such a weird time to throw them in finally.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle with some of the artwork, is that a lot of it has been moving towards more traditional anime girl style looks to them, which it's fine, if you're into that. But like for me, it's just not something that I necessarily look for in a card. And Dark Magician Girl was fine, but they've definitely moved. Like a lot of the artwork has moved towards a more of a traditional anime style, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of those cards.
It's probably because like there's a lot of people who are into that style, so that they have like this franchise exists to make money, so they're going to cater in some part to the fans who want that.
I blame Gotcha.
I definitely, I agree there. It's just like this is physical Gotcha at its basic. You pay money to get a random thing, and then maybe you get the one you want, and you try to game the system, or like
they even like I'm looking at a card now. Do you remember Weevil from literally the first like 10 episodes of season 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh?
The bug type card user?
Yes. He had that little snotty little voice, and did the like Yu-Gi. He threw Exodia off the boat and shit, and he summoned the Insect Queen, which cool. Yeah, this horrifying Insect Queen is the original one is very, very scary. Well,
but it still has tits on it. If you notice,
it does still have tits. But then later on, they did a retrain of it, and now it's got tits, and like it's in sort of like a sexy bug pose. I'm gonna send.
What is it called?
It's called. I'm sending it in our chat right now. It's a metamorphosed Insect Queen, and it's kind of like got like the sexy leg thing going on, and like the arms out and tits are like.
I guess.
I mean, but like you get what I'm saying. Like it's versus the original, which was just like scary bug with boobs. Like that's what.
Metamorphose Insect Queen definitely looks more like pointy. Okay, I was definitely expecting something more like this card I'm gonna drop in chat. Insect Princess. Which to me seems more of the cutesy anime girl, even though this is an old card.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some interesting things that they do with some of these cards that I'm just like, I don't really see where you're going with that. But a lot of the art is actually very nice, and I love the original artwork.
Yeah, and there's a lot of variety of art within the franchise. There's definitely is like a certain house style to it. You definitely get like a variety of looks and stuff. Like when Colt was talking about Outstanding Dog, Marin, and Mary, like those cards, it's like a realistically drawn dog. Like it doesn't look like a Yu-Gi-Oh monster with like spikes and swords and shit. It's just a dog.
Yes.
Like
yes. And then there was that one. Oh yeah, Tanner just sit in chat. Anteater eating ant. Yeah, that was a good one. That's a good.
That's
Yu-Gi-Oh
one of my
card.
favorites too.
Yeah, there's a lot of funniness in Yu-Gi-Oh cards too, especially with some of the storyline aspects, because you'll see like goblins and stuff doing some crazy shit. And the thing is, though, is a lot of that started from the English side of things, because the English cards had to be modified in a lot of ways to not be as scary, to not be as satanic, because Westerners can't handle a pentagram. And
or like tits, if like there's like any sort of sexually revealing
or a cross
like, character
on a fucking tombstone for some reason.
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's like no religious iconography.
yeah, no religion. We can't. But I mean, it's understandable. They would have been up in arms. There would have been.
Yeah, at the time there would, but like now,
Even today, you got to be kidding me. They would definitely, if Yu-Gi-Oh came out today and was like, "Hey, check out these, look at this back to life thing, or what is it? Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn used to be an Ankh, and they even took that out, which I'm surprised.
No,
but
the people that cared about that stuff back then are now crazy MAGA QAnon heads that don't really know what the hell a Yu-Gi-Oh is.
Anyways, so the Insect Queen cards of that nature, I think a lot of the original Yu-Gi-Oh cards were really cool. There's lots of little stories within the Yu-Gi-Oh cards we were talking about. We were also talking about the religious iconography. I guarantee you, if a cross were to come up in Yu-Gi-Oh at this point, people would freak out. But I mean, they even removed the Ankh from Monster Reborn. Like Monster Reborn originally was an Ankh, like the eternal life symbol in Egyptian mythology. But they removed that because it was so close to like a cross that they didn't want to scare people, I guess. But what ended up happening was a lot of those cards that they came over. I mean, there's a lot of censorship that happened. It wasn't just in religious iconography. It was also in how scary cards were. Like original Yu-Gi-Oh! Japanese cards, some of them, like especially the goblins and the demons and the stuff that was supposed to be like scary looking, was even scarier on the original Japanese, with teeth and fangs and, looking more evil and sinister and demonic. And a lot of that got changed, removed, whatever, in the English releases, and in doing so, kind of made them look goofy. Goofier, at least, than compared to the original Japanese cards. And in doing so, they were able to create whole storylines based on these Yu-Gi-Oh cards where they were just... where they're kind of goofy little characters. Like, I don't know if you remember, I think it was called Goblin Attack Force, maybe, was the card. But it had, Goblin Attack Force. For example, that there is a bunch of goblins with helmets and batons, and they've got a really strong attack and a 0 defense. Anyways, that goblin comes up over and over and over and over again throughout the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, the goblins themselves have a life of their own inside the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe, which I think is really cool. I think that it's cool that they do that there is a little bit of continuity between generations of cards by telling stories through the art.
I found a new favorite line of cards. I'm going to send them in the chat. I'm going to tell you the names when I send them. This is super cool. I love mechs. I love robots. I always do. These are kind of related in that same vein. It's essentially animals that are fighter planes and jets and stuff like that.
Yes.
Oh, I just said the same one twice. My bad.
Yes, the Phantom Beasts. Yeah, those are very cool. They have a Transformers set. They've got. Do you guys remember the Transformers? There's not really Transformers set. I shouldn't say that. Do you guys remember the Transformers, the little ones in that one Transformers show where the little ones would
the mini cons from like Armada?
Yes, and they would become like weapons and powerful accessories. They have they have cards that look like that. They have something called desk bots, which I imagine are just like little tiny bots. They have samurais, right? Of course, they have the samurais from 5Ds. Well, recently in Arc, I believe it was Arc 5, they released super heavy samurais, which are mech samurais or robotic samurais.
Yeah, I got one. I can't remember what set I opened a pack from, but I got one, and it looks really sick.
Yeah, they're super cool. Super heavy samurais are very, very cool. They have tons of different, like, basically, if you are going to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! For art, it does not matter what you're into this world. You could find... There are art there. I mean, in the new Rush Duel coming out, and I'm sure they have them in the past too. I don't know every card, but I looked at a lot of them recently. In the newest sets coming out, they have retooled a lot of the older cards into sports players. So you have But you have these different I'm trying to see if I can find it. They have ultra athletes is what they have. Another set of just ultra athletes. If you're into sports, if you're into cars, you can find a whole line of turbo cards that were released in 5Ds. You can find, I mean, hell, if you're into the classic dragons and knights and shit, like it's all there. Like Yu-Gi-Oh has all the artwork you want, all the different types of genres of artwork that you could ask for, all within one game. It's just learning that game and playing that game and hoping they're good.
I do appreciate that aspect. Like, you could be a complete fan of the series and never touch the actual game. Like, you can just like get the cards if you want to, or just, you know, go through like the Yu-Gi-Oh wiki and just like troll through the list of all the different like card sets. Like, one of my favorite series is the Elemental Heroes, because, you know, they're based off superheroes, and it's sort of fun to see like what their inspirations are, because in Yu-Gi-Oh GX, like the second big series after the original one ended, it's like it just this huge focus on fusion, and you had like 5 original Elemental Heroes, and then they sort of it ballooned off from there, and then you have all these different different combinations of those original 5, and then all the ones they added afterwards, and then all the sub sets after were like Elemental Heroes, like Neo-Spacian, Destiny Heroes, Vision Heroes, Masked Heroes, and I started getting into the Masked Heroes recently because they're very clearly based off like Tokusatsu and Kamen Rider. I mean, like, really, Kamen Rider means Masked Rider, so like they wear their inspirations like pretty closely on their sleeves. A newer line of cards I found out about through this Yu-Gi-Oh YouTube series called TGS Anime. I found out it's called the Vendread series.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's basically this line of cards based in part off of Resident Evil. You have like it's essentially like these undead supernatural like zombies, kind of spun off from there. Like, basically you have like all these animals and people who are possessed by these zombie-like spirits, and they mutate in the very Resident Evil style with like big eyeballs and claws and fangs and like spikes jutting out of them. There is like and there's a lot of ritual cards in that set, which is a bit unusual because ritual cards are more rare like card type.
They're outdated. They're really outdated. They were a fun story-driven gimmick in the original Yu-Gi-Oh like anime, and they kind of made sense in the original Yu-Gi-Oh game because they were super powerful. However, later on, like a lot of the old ritual cards, they got retrained into effect cards or Xyz or synchros or whatever. Like, for example, I don't know, one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time, because I thought it was just such a cool looking card, was I think it was Black Magician.
The Black Chaos Magician.
Yes, Magician of Black Chaos was the name of it. And
oh shoot, yeah, that card, it's pretty sick.
Yeah, so Magician of Black Chaos was great and all, but then what they did was they retrained it to be a effect card called Dark Magician of Chaos instead of Magician of Black Chaos. And it's the exact same character, just with a different card art, which I think is kind of cool looking. It's very, like, I don't know.
It looks like the original Dark Magician card with that ring in the background.
Yes, very early Yu-Gi-Oh! And I thought it was very cool. And then, of course, I believe they have something called Magician of Black Chaos Max, if that's a real card. I'm not 100% sure.
What about that elder magician? Is he part of the Dark Magician stuff?
Yeah, he's an older magician. I think he got a retrain as well, Dark Sage.
And I'm sending in chat like the main hero from the Vendread series, Revended Slayer, which is like so over the top in his design. He looks a lot. It takes a lot from Spawn, like this very like overly edgy design with little like Spider-Man like bone legs and like bones blades sticking out of him with like flaming red eyes.
That art style was fantastic.
That's what like his specific character, Revended Slayer, is like one of the reasons why I liked it, and plus just like how fucking over the top it is. Like, and plus his story, like basically in the Vendread world, like he was just a normal guy living in a city until like the the virus hit and his wife died, so he has like this tortured soul. And then he was mutated by the virus, but he turned this into superhero, and he like goes on this like mission to try to kill like this giant demon king made of skulls and shit. And he sort of goes through all this rigmarole. Like this version of himself returns like even more like edgy and badass, which is Revendred Executioner. Which like imagine like the busiest like character design ever, with like even more blades and saws, but like with just like flaming like energy lines jutting off of them. And then he evolves into his final form, which is Avended Slayer, which is somewhere in the middle, and who might have one of the best asses in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game series.
Very excited for this ass.
You've been hyping it up.
Ooh, that is a good ass. Ooh. Avendred Savior.
Yep. So he just like this ass that's just like mushed together by these like blade claws. You can bounce a quarter off that ass.
Do you know what this reminds me of? And I don't know why, but it reminds me. Colt, do you remember that game where you're in this disease-infected world where it's like it's mutating people, and you're like a anti-hero sort of character? And it was on like the PS3 that I played it, and it had like I think a second game come out.
Oh my god, I know exactly what it is. I see the logos and the icons. What in the hell? Prototype, yes, that's what it reminds me of a little bit. And of course, this is one of those cards where it kind of spans multiple different kind of cards, right? You have ritual cards, you have link cards, you have all these different kinds of cards with these different abilities. I mean, but the thing is, though, is if you look at Avendred Savior, it's a zombie link effect. You have to sacrifice 2 zombie monsters. This card's name becomes Revendred Slayer, so it's not really... It is Avendred Savior, but it's a different kind of card. What the fuck? I don't know what that means. I'm looking at the card, and how does it become a different card when it's already this card?
Because it acts as a different card. So if there's another magic card that kind of goes along with that Revendred Slayer, then this card acts as both a Revendred and an Avendred. Anyways, it should be. It is a highly complicated game. Also, those 2 red arrows right there are the only places you can place other link monsters on the field. So, like, you have to place this card in the extra monster slot, which is a brand new thing just introduced April of 2020. You place the card there, and then the 2 arrows will point, and those are the only 2 areas where more link cards can be placed. Isn't that insane? Anyways, yeah, those are really cool cards. I personally am. I am personally like partial to the Dark Magician lineup, because I do think because Dark Magician in the original Yu-Gi-Oh Yu-Gi-Oh show and game or whatever, in the original was just 1 card. And then they released Magician of Black Chaos, and it was like, okay, well, this Magician of Black Chaos, because Magician of Black Chaos was a ritual card that was brought out during the fight with Pegasus, if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
Well, then those 2 cards, I'm like, okay, well, these 2 cards look very similar to each other. Like, I'm like, these cards, everyone thought like they had some connection, but there was no connection between the 2. Even though they were 2 magicians, they look very similar in style, but one was like a little kinkier, I guess, than the other one.
Basically, like, imagine like if like this satanic looking like blue skinned wizard with like every sort of belt and strap and gimp suit and like a big like frizzed out hair. You kind of get the Magician of Black Chaos.
Yes, and then they came out with Dark Magician Girl, and then later on they came out with even more support. And those are the kind of the 2 things that you'll hear a lot of times about older cards are something called retrains, which are old cards that have been remade for a new world. There's a ton of retrains that you wouldn't even think of. Like, I don't know if you remember Aqua Matador, any?
Aqua Matador.
Well, they did and I'll send it in chat.
Oh yeah, that's one of the oldest cards. Like it's just a simple like plain text monster with no ability.
4-star, 2,000 defense. It was a wall back in the day. You really could not get past him. Well, then they retrained him to be Neo Aquamador with a totally like different art style. It's actually a little bit cooler. And I'll send that right here. They retrained that card And it's still a non-effect monster with 1,200 attack, but it did bump up the defense by 3,000 and raise its level by 2. So you still would. So it takes 1 summon, but then you've got a 3,000 level card.
It's like basically giving like these old cards like a new lease on life, because there's no way it'd be very difficult for them to be viable in the current game's land space. But having these extra effects and sort of like re-releasing them under with different like abilities like keeps the cards viable. Like these very popular like wall-like cards from the original series or earlier series anyway.
But then they retrained it one more time to be the Light Raymador, which is a light version of the card, still 6 cards, still 1,200 and 3,000, but with a totally new effect. It's actually an effect monster now. With 3 or more light monsters are banished, you can special summon this card from your hand.
That's a good ability.
I mean, it's fine, but it's kind of difficult to do that. And unless you're using like a deck that specifically bans light cards, there's really no reason to do that, to have that card in your deck, and it's really not that great at the end of the day. But the thing is, though, is that something that's important is the retrains. So retraining is just old cards made new, renew, and then you're going to see another term that's used a lot, and a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh fans are really salty about this. Is support. Support cards being cards that directly help and support
specific monsters and characters.
I just found a 4th version of the Aquamador called the Glacier Aquamador.
Would not be surprised, because I don't know why, but everyone loved the Aquamador. It was very mysterious when it first came out, and then people just sort of stuck to it. But yes, the support cards that help other cards. So, for example, one card that continues to get retrains and redesigns and a shit ton of support is none other than Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, there is a brand new Blue Eyes White Dragon every single time there's a new, like, big set or whatever. Every 4 years, they come out with a retrain or a specialty of Blue Eyes White Dragon. The Blue Eyes Dragon line is so fucking big. And at first, it was, like, simple retrains where it's just Blue Eyes White, like a Blue Eyes White Dragon type card with a small effect, and then you had like the Priestess of Blue Eyes or Princess of Blue Eyes, whatever it's called. Very cool cards. And then now they're like just taking Blue Eyes, the base of what a Blue Eyes is, which is what, 3,000 attack, 2,500 defense. I can't remember. I think that's the case. They're taking the basics of Blue Eyes, adding an effect, making a dragon with a slight white color to it, calling it some crazy name, and suddenly it is basically like a brand new Blue Eyes. But the one card that does not continue to get support and hasn't really gotten support in like almost a decade now is, I believe this is the case, Dark Magician. And so Dark Magician always gets snubbed. So Blue, of course, and you can see that even today in, I believe, the new Ghost of the Past.
Because I do remember, I think in a recent video I saw online that there was like finally some new Dark Magician support, which is like for people who really enjoy that card, like there's like a kind of like a very welcome, where pretty good feel like, oh, our favorite's being like neglected. Let's give this one some beef.
And speaking of which, that Every Yu-Gi-Oh card Twitter page, which shout out to them if you're listening to this podcast, we love you. We've been looking at your stuff for the past year. Just tweeted out a Master with Blue Eyes, which is of course a Blue Eyes support card. That it says it's a tuner, and it came out in SHV1. I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing since it's a tuner, it came out during the 5Ds.
Yeah, like I'm looking at the link you sent that showed the Blue Eyes Jet Dragon from the new set Battle of Chaos. They also got Tyrant of D coming in, and I did not picture the rest of his body looking like that.
Well, yeah, that Tyrant of D is it looks like, I think it's a retrain of the Magician of D, or the Spellcaster of D, or whatever the hell it's called, because if you remember the Dragon Flute that the guy, you had to have the Dragon of D, the Magician of D, or whatever the hell it's called, and then you have the flute and you could summon a dragon. I mean, Blue Eyes is one of those really, really, really strong cards that you can get out easy, quote unquote, because there's so many cards that shove it in your hand, and it's very like it's not very useful. A lot of these support cards for anything else because it's like yes, it doesn't have anything about Blue Eyes on there, but you can only bring out 3,000 attack light monsters with 8 or more. It's like okay, we know who you're talking about. But anyways, they do a lot of retrains for that anyway. We were getting really deep in the weeds here with this, but retrain and support,
yeah, for sure.
Whenever you're looking into Yu-Gi-Oh, those are two words that you'll always see that I was like, what the fuck's a retrain? And then I went down a rabbit hole of figuring out, holy shit. So they have retrained the everything at this point. And you got to, and I would say my favorite part of Yu-Gi-Oh, my favorite time period of Yu-Gi-Oh was the Battle City arc. In my opinion, that was peak, for me at least, Yu-Gi-Oh.
In terms of like the anime, in terms of just the game, or just like that's just the crystallized moment you have of the series.
It's a little bit of a crystallized moment, but I think it to me was one of those moments where no, I don't want to say the game was perfect. It was never perfect. It's never going to be a perfect game. It's too complicated to be a perfect game. But and I do think that's another reason why they're shifting towards a new play style with this Rush Duel shit. Is because I think they realized, this is a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. But I think Battle City Arc is interesting because there's a lot of lore that goes into these cards, into that card section. It added a lot more complexity. It was when Yu-Gi-Oh! Finally had an idea of what it wanted to be, and it kind of went for it. I see you're sending some cards in chat, Pat.
Yeah, I'm preloading the chat with some of my other favorites.
Oh yes, I see.
Continue.
I see. Yeah, and I really liked the Battle City arc because it was capped off by the God cards, right? So we had Exodia being destroyed in the very first season, which is sad, and then you didn't really have any God cards after that. But the Egyptian God cards were so menacing, so scary, and so powerful that it was hard to imagine ever coming up against them. And I don't know. It's a very cool moment in Yu-Gi-Oh! For me. I really liked a lot of the aesthetics they were going for. Obviously, the Egyptian aesthetic is very nice. But for me, Battle City is and always will be the pinnacle of Yu-Gi-Oh! For me.
My other favorite card series from like the GX era was the Ojama series, which are like these really weird, strange looking alien characters in like a bright pink Speedo. And like these were just like basic monster cards, but then they kind of, like a lot of popular series and or popular characters in the series, they sort of just ballooned out with several support cards, several additions to their story, and like even today in like the Link monster era, like they have like one I sit in chat, like the Ojama Emperor, like so like even this card even over 10 years ago is still getting like support in the current game.
Yeah. I'm really loving those little dudes. They're a little wacky and crazy.
Yeah, when I had never really seen them or played with. I've seen them in like the offsets, but I started playing with them in the actual game. I forgot the name of it. Dual Link whatever game, and I was super surprised at how fun they were. They are so much fun to play.
And like going back to like to the humor of this series, like their whole like the whole gag of them are just like these like kind of delinquent, truant like little monsters, and like they kind of just bumble their way through like the implied story of their characters. And I just loved like how silly their art was and just like their story and their character. A newer card type that I was introduced to by the boys during our Yu-Gi-Oh phase right now is the dinosaur series, where each character is based off a dinosaur in a different type of like martial art. Specifically, the wrestling dinosaurs. Like we have this one Link effect monster. He's a Dino Wrestler King T Rexel, which is a T-Rex with like wrestler gear and like dinosaur bones on his shoulder, and Dino Wrestler Giga Spinosavate, which is it's like superhero Spinosaur that fights using Savate, which is a synchro effect monster. And like, you know, I'm a basic guy. I like wrestling and I like dinosaurs, so like just like something like this is just super cool. Like they find something that just sort of really like endears itself to like your inner child, like the most basic part of your imagination.
Yeah, and I do. I think that's where Yu-Gi-Oh is its best, is when it doesn't take itself too seriously. Obviously it's very cool to have like the Blue Eyes, the whole like Blue Eyes magicians and things like that. But the fact that you can have someone play super serious, like murderous demons and magicians alongside weird little creatures, with smug faces and a pink thong on. I think that's where Yu-Gi-Oh is just it shines really.
It's just the enormous variety and just like it's large appeal. Like there's people that are still playing after damn near 20 years and people who are just picking it up today. So it really shows like the strength of its series. At the basic point, it's monsters and its characters and its ideas that appeal to this very simplistic part of you that it's like, hey, this is fun. If nothing else, it's fun to look at, even if it's a bit of a challenge to figure out. So, and even in the most barest capacity, just from observation of the art and the characters, like you're going to have some sort of fun with the series. Like there's even people who like probably aren't even big fans. It's just like talking about like the dumbest names in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a TikTok series where they talk about all the silly names that come up in Yu-Gi-Oh! Which like that in itself is fun, just adjacent to the series itself.
Pat, say the name of the one that I can't remember, but you know what it is.
The Gaga Gigo series.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of those.
Which is a long running like character in the series that it starts off as this little reptile guy named Gigabyte, and he goes through several phases where he goes from like this little happy character to like this like demonic monster. He goes from Gigabyte to Gigabyte to Gaga Gigo to Giga Gaga Gigo, then Go Giga Gaga Gigo, and Gaga Gigo the Risen. So yeah, like that's his whole fucked up storyline, and it's like just like a aberrant, brutal monster with just the most ridiculous name.
There's also Dododo, which it's fun, but it really does come off as doo-doo in my brain whenever I see it. I just sent it in chat. There was Dododo Witch, and every time I see it, I see Doo-Doo Witch. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just like...
The Dodo cards look cool, too.
Yeah, they're just, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. Yu-Gi-Oh's a lot of fun in a lot of different ways. It's fun with friends. It's fun if you don't take it too seriously. I don't think it would be fun if you did take it seriously. I just don't. I think it would be very stressful if you did, but if you do, that's up to you. But yeah, I love the art. I love everything about Yu-Gi-Oh! In a lot of ways, and I'm going to continue on. I'm going to try my best to keep up with it and not let it fall to the wayside for 12 years like I did.
Cody just picks up the franchise once every decade or so, and he gets really into it for a while. Then it goes back to hibernation.
Yeah, right now I'm hyperfixating on, what is it called? Elder Scrolls. So that's where I am now.
Once every 5 years. Here's another fucked up name. Dodo do do dwarf go 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 goglove. And to summon this, you need to special summon one Zubaba or Gagaga monster from your hand.
You're just speaking like a baby.
That's exactly what it sounds
it's
like.
Just baby talk.
I do wonder what was going through the head of those who created the cards. And it's a fucking scary looking card. Oh, no, never mind. That's something that Pat sent.
Yeah, unlike the goofy name, someone made up a card. It's called the Donking Bong Dong. And it says, once per chain, fuck you. It's like this, like, all glitzed out and, like, fried looking monster.
And honestly, I thought it was a real card at first. I thought I would.
Yeah, the do dwarf go 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 glove.
Dodo
there you go.
Dwarf. Go.
Remember, you got to special summon with Zubaba or Gagaga monster.
And it's not even a good card.
No, it just got a fucked up name.
Anyways,
which is funny too. Like there's just cards that exist for the bit. Like they're not a viable in play, but just like, you know what, we're making this just for the hell of it.
Might as well.
I think that's a nice run of the gamut of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a strange hyperfixation in our group right now, but it's just tying back to some deeply held memories of the series from when we were children, or just it's a newfound interest. And it's been really fun to re-examine and fall back in love with this series. And let us know what your connection to Yu is. Whatever capacity of the series that you experience, we want to hear from you. So be sure to let us know wherever you can reach out to us. Our DMs are always open. So thank you all so much for listening today. You can follow us wherever podcasts can be found. That's on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, Anchor. We're on all of those. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe on all of those places. It keeps us visible, puts us in front of new people. And, of course, we always appreciate you when you do it. You can follow us on our socials on Twitter and Instagram at AYCH Podcast, Letterboxd and Facebook at All You Can Hear, Twitch at twitch.tv/AllYouCanHear, and YouTube as well, which is also at All You Can Hear. If you're listening to this the week it comes out on Tuesday, Tanner has a brand new episode where he's interviewing Captain Shimmy himself, Justin, the guy who comes up with all the musical accompaniments for the AYCH network and is the lead host of Caging Greatness. And speaking of which, on Thursday, you can look forward to a new episode of Caging Greatness where we have an off-topic episode called Uncaged, where we're discussing, for one reason or another, the new comic book series created by actor and comedian John Leguizamo, and quite possibly one of the most interesting movies in his early career, called The Pest. And it's well known in certain aspects, and that'll be interesting to explore. And lastly, you can follow me, Patrick, on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at John Lost His Name, and my art on Facebook at John Lost His Name Art.
My name Colt. Follow me on Twitter at ColtD00. Also, we've already said their name once or twice. Go ahead and follow every YGO card on Twitter. It's a very cool account.
Hello, I'm Cody. Go ahead and follow me at CODDOC11 on Letterboxd. That's where I'm mostly chilling these days. So find me and look at my ratings for things, which apparently is very controversial.
And also, he doesn't mention when he watches these movies. What are you hiding, Cody?
Look, hear me out. I don't have to prove anything.
If I can log Ridiculous Six and some garbage-ass movie, you can tell me when you watched Pork Belly Outside Manchester. I don't know what a movie's called. You can log some crap.
Look, it's not that I don't like logging. It's just that I didn't understand it.
Oh, so you're almost 30. That's what's going on.
Yeah, I am reached the age where I'm like, wow, I don't get the point of this. Social media. Yeah, I did not realize that you guys could not see it. I thought everybody was just rating and moving on and not adding them to their log.
Wow.
We know what you have to do now, Cody. You have to go back and put the date to every movie you watched since you started Letterboxd.
Oh,
that's the only choice now.
That is not happening. That's not happening. You guys can suck my cock at that point. You'll never know.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me today, and we'll be talking to you all very soon. Thank you, and have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.